Welcome boys and girls, Kostaltyn here with a discussion about the updated Legendary Lords of Kislev in Total War Warhammer 3 Immortal Empires patch 6.1. I'm going to talk about the changes, and I'm also going to talk about their rankings, which is the worst, which is the best. Well, I think the worst Legendary Lord for Kislev is actually Katarin. It used to be Katarin before, it still is Katarin post-patch. Certainly, her campaign is vastly better compared to where it was before. Like, victory conditions have been updated in a substantial way, in the sense that it would take you like 100 turns or so to get 600 supporters for your short campaign victory conditions if you're playing Katarin. Now, you can get it done in about 30 turns to complete your short campaign victory condition and achieve the hero capacity increase over here. So you need to get to tier 10 with Ice Court support level. That will be faster than gaining, much faster than gaining 600 supporters. On top of that, one benefit for both Katarin and Kostaltyn is that they no longer have the restriction on confederation with each other. You no longer have guaranteed confederation, but I would say it's a much bigger benefit to be able to confederate other because you do get access to the landmarks of their cities. Speaking about landmarks, the Kislev has gotten a bit of an update with regards to landmarks, just something. So the Boka Palace tier 5 allows for one greater tier difference in support between the Ice Court before penalties are applied. So the way the supporter system works is you want to maintain balance between the two, otherwise you're going to start getting penalties. Initially, it starts with the diplomatic penalty with other faction, the one that's lower, but then it will translate into like a devotion benefit, that kind of stuff. So you don't want the harmony to be upset if you're playing a Kislev campaign. But Katarin has that also as a faction effect. She gains one greater tier difference allowed, permitted, with the Orthodoxy before penalties are applied. She has a minus 20 diplomatic relations penalty with the Orthodoxy. She gets 15 research rate, hero recruit rank for Ice Court, for Frost Maidens, Ice Court training cost reduced by 10%, and wins a magic power reserve capacity plus 20. So I would say her faction effects are better than they were before. Like, that was one of the things with Katarin. Her faction effects were kind of worthless, especially because you had the severe limitation on how many Frost Maidens you could get. So yeah, having a hero recruit rank sounds great until you realize you can only get so many of them. But you now have the Ministerial Housing, which gives you a hero capacity plus 1 for Frost Maidens, so you can crank out as many of them as you want. Katarin does still start with Ice Sculpting as an initial benefit, so she can get 2 Frost Maidens fairly quickly. Whether or not you're using the load save character system, you can still use the load save character system. You can still get the previous traits before they were changed, but obviously the traits over here have been changed quite a bit. So just worth pointing that aspect with regards to her campaign. She does still start with the same pretty crappy starting position, starting army, etc. But she does have a better time with regards to supporters. In fact, she's actually in a better starting position than Kostaltyn in one way, in the sense that she can start gaining supporters from turn 1 by fighting chaos. Though she'll have the limitation of only being able to get supporters with the Ice Court through battles against chaos. So if I go over here, unresolve that. And yes, there is a post-battle option for fighting chaos. Regardless, you can see that I gain 10 with the Ice Court, but nothing with the Orthodoxy. So if you want to gain supporters for the Orthodoxy, you need to fight their enemies. That does mean when you're playing a Katarin campaign, you are going to struggle to get Orthodoxy support. It's not especially great in a lot of different ways. I would say if there is a benefit, however, is that it is harder typically, or there's more incentive to get a lot of Orthodoxy support than it is Ice Court support, because you may benefit more from getting a lot of these churches early on, because you can increase patriarch capacity at tier 2 as opposed to tier 3, and you do have some you do lose the income benefit of the courtroom if you go for that extra Frost Maiden capacity. So just pointing out, there are some benefits in the sense that it's easier to get into a war involved with Kostaltyn's enemies than Katarin's enemies. Like with Katarin, if you're playing Kostaltyn, you do have to trade stuff to Katarin to get her involved and that kind of stuff. You do gain 2 supporters per turn from her Lord effect, corruption benefit, 25% Ice Guard upkeep benefit. So her Ice Guard Doom stack, so to speak, has been nerfed by quite a bit, actually, in terms of upkeep and even combat potential. We'll get into her special skill line to explain that. But Kislev's economy is so much better that it doesn't really matter regards to that. So it's still an upkeep benefit with Ice Guard, but it has been lowered. And miscast base chance minus 50%. Now, the problem with Katarin is that her spells that she has, like the Lore of Frost or the Lore of Ice, is just not as good as Tempest Magic. Like, Tempest Magic is typically better. And the thing about it, Katarin does not necessarily have that many benefits compared to generic Ice Witch or Frost Maiden. Because you might say, oh, but she has a Winds of Magic benefit, and she has cooldown benefit and all those kind of things. Yes, she does, but you can get some of that with a regular Frost Maiden. Not the Vanguard one, though. And there is a choice you can make, but suffice to say that regular Frost Maidens and Ice Witches can actually surpass Katarin. They have better spells, and while they may not have the same kind of casting benefits, they're not necessarily that far off compared to her. So Ice Mistress, I think it should be buffed as a skill line. Like, you look at Drazov, he has a much better skill line in respect to that. She does have a buff in terms of melee capability, so she gets melee damage reflection with permafrost wards. She gets furry armor, 15% HP. She still had combat benefits, but I think that has been buffed. Melee attack, melee defense for Ice Guard, campaign move range. Con Queen has been changed to give you 100% allegiance points from alliance with Kislev. Allows for one greater tier difference, so you can get up to 3 tier difference permitted if you're playing Katarin. She does have 8 devotion on a local province, 10 diplomatic relations with all Kislev factions, and also reduces enemy leadership by -7. So that is pretty solid, but the one significant nerf in her campaign, she used to have a ward save of, 8%? Now she has 360 missile block for her army, missile block chance of 15%, so that's a bronze shield, and immunity to flanking 2 herself. The only race that you're realistically going to deal with in a Katarin campaign that would have masses of range units would be like Chaos Dwarves. And even then, not necessarily as much as you might think. Like, they might just recruit a bunch of Hobgoblin archers. So that ward save was vastly superior, so Katarin has kind of gotten a bit of a nerf there. To be clear, her campaign is better, Kislev City is better, but yeah, I do think that between the supporter limitations of her campaign and her less than amazing skill line, that she actually is the worst Legendary Lord of Kislev to play at the moment. Think that if there is a disappointment I have with the rework of Kislev is that Katarin and Kostaltyn desperately needed it to become better, and sadly enough, they didn't. The second worst Kislev campaign is Kostaltyn. So just like Katarin can't gain supporters with the Orthodoxy unless she helps Kostaltyn's faction in battle on the campaign, it works the same way with Ice Court if you're playing Kostaltyn. So that is a limitation. You do start with 40 supporters for the Orthodoxy, 20 with the Ice Court, but there are certainly some other things to consider with regards to Kostaltyn. He does get greater tier difference benefits with the Orthodoxy, and this I would say is generally better than Ice Court because you can easily, I would say you have a bigger incentive to push your Orthodoxy support than the Ice Court support. Like, just because the benefits that the Orthodoxy provides for supporters are early on in a campaign better than the benefits of the Ice Court for the supporter system. But okay, looking at Kostaltyn, otherwise, like, he does still have that ward save, melee attack, leadership for Kislev warriors, Kossars, Kossovite dervishes, and horse archer units. That ward save for embedded patriarchs is pretty sweet because you can get a far greater amount of patriarchs than you did before. He does gain 2 supporters for the Orthodoxy when recovery time, rage for his entire army, so no longer frenzy, but rage. Interesting decision over there. So effect intensity increases with time spent engaged in melee with regard to that. Then you can also get greater benefit for Orthodoxy support for Firebrand, local recruitment capacity, recruitment cost, aura of immolation, melee attack, leadership, flaming attacks. He can recruit patriarchs in every province through Promote the Pious. He does have immune to psychology, charge bonuses, Pete for his entire army. He has heroic resilience for his entire army. So melee, defense, leadership, and being unbreakable. Though that is not necessarily the biggest benefit as you might think. Like, having unbreakable lords, like typically lords would only rout, like especially Kislev lords, because you gotta remember the blood aspect. Kislev lords, or lords in general, when they rout, you kind of want them to rout. So him being unbreakable is not necessarily the biggest benefit in the world. So you gotta be a bit careful, especially because Kostaltyn is kind of squishy. But then you get minus 20% construction costs for Orthodoxy buildings in all provinces, and income from all buildings 10% faction-wide. So yes, Kostaltyn is substantially better than Katarin. The one downside I would dare say that exists with Kostaltyn is that very early on in his campaign, like Katarin has a couple of battles where she'll gain some supporters by battling chaos. You have to deliberately pick a fight with Azazel, which is certainly a far more difficult battle than Katarin's situation. Though both of you have to then deal with fraud, so that's a bit annoying. You do have a harder time than Katarin to confederate the Tzarina Enclave, though you can certainly do so. I would probably recommend just selling Castle Alexandrinov to these fellows right here on turn 1 and taking their settlement, because that way you can prevent fraud from gaining territory over there. That is one of the benefits of Kostaltyn's campaigns. Fraud is not going to declare war on you, so it prevents him from getting a recruitment benefit, so he's just down to help it over there. You can also confederate the Brotherhood of the Bear, though, fairly easily, and you have a better time than Katarin confederating Prague. And also Erengrad early on is a much better, well, kind of a better city. So it doesn't have the same kind of growth benefit that Kislev has, but you don't have to construct the structure at tier 1, an additional structure, because you start with the port. So pros and cons with regards to it, but I think like just being able to get the Brotherhood of the Bear, get Prague easier, and also prevent fraud from gaining a foothold over there does overall give Kostaltyn a bigger benefit. But realistically, I would just say like Kostaltyn is much, much better. Like Patriarch recruitment faction-wide is an enormous benefit in your campaign, because you can gain a ridiculous amount of Patriarchs in your campaign. Like if we look, like there's various structures that are available over here. Like, there are certain structures in the special Kislevite cities, so supporters, all that. There's also a structure to help you out if the Orthodoxy is neglected or the Ice Court is neglected, but only in those special cities, so you gain 25 supporters. But in regular settlements, you can get the Orthodoxy Oubliette, which gives you +2 hero capacity for Patriarchs. That means you can have dozens and dozens of Patriarchs pretty quickly in a Kislev campaign. And with that 20% ward save that Kostaltyn has, I would dare say he has a significant advantage compared to Katarin. It does... So Katarin and Kostaltyn were the worst 2 Legendary Lords of Kislev before. They still are in that situation. They are better, much better to play, but they don't hold a candle, from my point of view, to Ostankya and Boris Ursus, where things get a bit more complicated in terms of ranking them, for a number of reasons. Next up, we have Mother Ostankya, and this isn't to say that I think Ostankya is necessarily the second best Legendary Lord for Kislev. In fact, she might be the best on a certain level. But there's pros and cons between her and Boris Ursus, so let's consider the situation that she has to deal with in her campaign. After turn 1, she gets a choice of either staying in Nagrand or teleporting back to Kislev. The developers actually introduce a warning when you do have that choice that this will make your campaign far more difficult. But there are also significant benefits, because if you stay in Nagrand, you won't gain supporters. Whereas if you teleport over here to Plesk, and that's where you'll gain a settlement over here, a tier 1 settlement. It will have this building, the Earthen Hollow, available to it, as well as 2 landmarks in the Eastern Oblast. And you'll be at war with the minor Norscan faction over here as well. So, considering Ostankya's situation, under the assumption that you teleport to Kislev, because that's a lot more power, the one benefit with her is that you can gain supporters of both the Orthodoxy and the Ice Court through battling their enemies, and also gain supporters with both Orthodoxy and Ice Court by fighting chaos. Though weirdly enough, Skaven don't count as chaos, even though they literally are considered chaos. Okay. In terms of her faction effect, she gets a global recruitment duration of -1 turn for incarnate elemental of beast units, wins a magic power reserve capacity for each resource producing building. So the more you have, the more you're gonna have over there. She actually makes Katarin look weak. I mean, it's rather a factor that the longer you play a campaign as Ostankya, the stronger you'll be. You might not have the strongest early game situation, but you will be far stronger than even Boris Ursus in some ways in a long campaign. You do get melee attack and melee defense. So you get melee attack when fighting against armies that spread corruption, so basically chaos. And Skaven, funnily enough, you get melee defense for spider hatchling and giant spider units, which you can possibly recruit fairly early on in your campaign. Beyond that, you do have 2 landmarks in the Eastern Oblast that only Ostankya has access to. So you get the Widow's Tree at tier 3, which gives you hero recruitment hag, growth local provinces, all provinces, hero capacity for hag witches, and hero recruit rank for hag witches, all provinces. And then you have Ostankya's hut over here in Volksgrad, which gives you Spirit Essence cost for hexes, income, and diplomatic relations plus 30 with all Kislev factions. Hilariously, at least in this version, I literally just recruited an Ice Witch Lord through the load save character system, just to be clear on this, over here, and she stuck around in Nagaron, so your settlement here gets abandoned. So I actually have another of Ostankya's huts in the Bleakhold Fortress. So yeah, that is a bit ridiculous, though to be fair, you can always get back to Nagaron later on, so this is not necessarily the biggest benefit, and you will be paying an early game price. But I imagine that's a bug, and it should probably be fixed. But it's just kind of a hilarious aspect over there that I wanted to point out with regards to Ostankya. On top of that, she does still have the Witch's Hut. So yes, it is frustrating having to, go every turn and just do this every single time when you're playing her campaign right here. But but you do have the strongest army of Kislev through those kind of hexes. So someone like Archeon, who can be very dangerous, is going to be much easier to deal with. On top of that, if you play your cards right here with diplomacy, you can really remove a lot of the pressure on Boris Ursus and ensure that he actually builds up a fairly solid control of territory over there. And you can also get Prague Confederation pretty quickly in her campaign. So that is a very tangible benefit in Ostankya's campaign. Another benefit to also point out here with Ostankya, if you're playing any other Kislev campaign, you may not necessarily get Ostankya as a confederation because you need to go to Nagaron to get her. But if you're playing an Ostankya campaign, you can guarantee you can get all the other Kislev Legendary Lords. Sure, you do have to play the confederation game, but you get through her Lord effects, targeting, range for spells, enemy wins a magic power reserve -5 per turn, magical attacks, base count, miscast base chance for embedded hack witch heroes, minus 50% for embedded hag witches. Then all kinds of benefits to magic. Crucially, you get hag witch recruitment in all provinces. So Frost Maidens can be recruited in all provinces inherently. If you confederate Kostaltyn, you get Patriarchs. If you confederate to Ostankya or you're playing Ostankya, you get hag witches. So this is one of the benefits in terms of playing as Ostankya, in that you get all of these heroes that you can recruit globally. That is a very, very powerful benefit, regardless of how you cut it. Ambush success chance, melee attack charge bonus when in your own territory, wins a magic reserve, benefit to spells, and then curse benefit, spirit bear, and cause of fear when fighting against humans, hilariously enough, with respect to that. Okay. So those are the kind of benefits that you have when you're playing Ostankya. The flexibility of the starting position, the huge advantage in terms of supporters, and on top of that, a research benefit that shouldn't be ignored. Because Ostankya does have a unique research tree, or a tab over here in the land. So she gets, beyond all the regular research that every other Kislev campaign has, she gets all of these kind of research benefits. So, snipe for Akshina, campaign movement range, minus 20% for enemies starting in your region's campaign movement range. So you have a lot of benefits that only Ostankya can get. Whether or not you consider Ostankya the best or second best Legendary Lord of Kislev, that's gonna be your decision. I've listed all the advantages that she has, but let me go into Boris Ursus. However, it should be pointed out that Ostankya also has these top bar abilities that are very significant. So I feel from a long campaign perspective, in a lot of ways, though not all of them, Ostankya ends up winning against Boris Ursus. Because she not only has the entire supporter system available, she not only has the invocations for armies and provinces available, she also has all of the benefits that come in her campaign. And crucially, once you finish unlocking all of the things in the top bar, she is able to debuff an entire race. I'm not sure which race you'd want to debuff completely. Maybe Dark Elves, probably. You know, if you're starting Kislev and you want to go back to Nagaron at one point. But it is worth pointing out. She also has, quite crucially, Wasteland and Frozen Climate beyond Mountain. But she also has Magical Forest. But she has Wasteland. This is important because one of the problems Kostaltyn and Katarin have is they don't have Wasteland. Boris Ursus and Ostankya do. So that means Tzarina Grund is on the menu for them, in a way that it absolutely is not for Katarin and Kostaltyn. Yes, you can get Atamans, and Atamans can get the skill that removes the climate penalties, but it is a pretty substantial advantage having that inherently in a campaign, as opposed to what Katarin and Kostaltyn have to deal with. On top of that, one of the reasons Kostaltyn and Katarin get left in the dust is that both Boris Ursus and Ostankya have a better situational chaotic wasteland than Katarin and Kostaltyn do. So you can end up in the same result if you're playing those campaigns. You'll just be able to achieve this much faster and earlier with Ostankya. The downside is you kind of have the worst starring situation of a Kislev campaign, or the more limited one, because you do have to build up settlements. And you might say, oh, Boris Ursus has to do the same. Yeah, but he at least starts with Patriarch. And a very powerful early game army, far more powerful than Ostankya. So there is that kind of trade-off that you got to talk about between the campaigns. But let's go over Boris Ursus. So with Boris Ursus, I would say it's probably one of the more ridiculous campaigns available in the game right now, with the exception of the campaigns like the Widows or Warriors of Chaos who can just vassalize their way to victory. He is ridiculous in many different ways. So let's consider the upsides of his campaign. Now, obviously the downsides is he doesn't have those kind of hexes that Ostankya has. He doesn't have the top bar ability. He just has regular supporters. But settlements in Chaos Wasteland climates gain additional devotion. He has a 30 diplomatic relations benefit with Ice Court, 5% campaign move range faction-wide, so he's on par with Ostankya when you consider her research, 30% construction costs for garrison and religion building. Yeah, religion building. So when you're thinking about religion, understand that Boris Ursus, if he confederates Kostaltyn and gets some supporters, he can basically construct churches for free. That is pretty insane when you think about it. But is it just churches? Well, yeah, it is just churches. Unfortunately, the Ice Court doesn't count as a religious building. More importantly, he gets a construction time of -1 turn for provincial capital and settlement buildings and recruiter rank +2 for warbear riders. That is very, very powerful. And what does that devotion from Chaotic Wasteland look like? Keeping in mind one thing, Atamans have the ability of negating climate penalties, but when they do so, you lose this benefit. So bear that in mind. But you get +3 devotion per settlement in a province. So he can get a lot more devotion, which translates into all of these army abilities or settlement abilities through devotion over there. But yes, there is a price you do have to pay for that particular benefit. But all the same, that's not the only reason why Boris Ursus is so strong. And you can also get a confederation with Prague pretty early on in your campaign if you decide to go with that. Another advantage, as I mentioned, he doesn't have Magical Forest, but he does have Wasteland, so Tzarina Katarin is on the menu for him as well. Very, very powerful. And he gains supporters with both Ice Court and Orthodoxy in the same way. But let me explain something. The reason Boris Ursus is so freaking ridiculous is he starts with those Warbear, he starts with those Star Guards, he starts with those Armored Kossars in his campaign, and a Patriarch. That's a very, very good starting army. He then has... He does construct settlements faster. That's not a substantial benefit. Then he has a minus 25% upkeep for Warbear Riders, leadership, melee attack, and immune to cast corruption, and cast waste attrition. Pretty powerful benefits. And then they buffed him even further. And that is... I'm not sure why I went with Lord Leader of Renown over here. I may have just screwed up. But anyway, you get a 50% battle healing cap, immune to psychology, recruit rank for Warbear Riders, all armies faction-wide. So you're looking at +5 recruit rank for Warbear Riders, which are a very good unit. In particular in auto-resolve, but obviously in battle as well. More importantly, and this is where the insanity starts kicking in for Boris Ursus. He gets a 10 growth to all provinces and no colonization cost faction-wide. Given the fact that you're dealing with factions like Khorne or Warriors of Chaos who would have a tendency of raising settlements to the ground, this is an enormous benefit. And there are 2 settlements like Yetkich and Frozen Landing that start out ruined. This is the reason they start ruined is so you can take advantage of this in this campaign. You do have a construction cost for all buildings, construction time for garrison and religion buildings in the local province. You get allegiance point 100% from alliances with Kislev. Allows a greater tier difference for orthodoxy, very diplomatic relations with Kislev, 8 devotion in the local province, and enemy leadership -7. So basically, similar to Katarin's little benefit, just better. So yeah, Boris Ursus is the real leader of Kislev, and you can't convince me otherwise. Katarin's just playing at being queen. Very importantly, he did lose, so he has Band of Brutes. He did lose, if I'm not mistaken, no, he didn't lose, he just had a skill line change. But he does have Great Reclaimer, which gives him 10% campaign movement range and 2 population surplus for newly captured settlements for his army. Now, faction-wide for his army. This is ridiculously good. Then he has Glorious Charge for his entire army. You know how let me explain why this is so fucking absurd. Glorious Charge for Griffin Legion and Wing Lancers is a ridiculously powerful benefit. Having it for his entire army is an insanely powerful benefit. Now, you can always argue, can Confederate Boris Ursus if you're playing another Kislev campaign? Fair. But it's not going to be the same kind of benefit you have when you're playing him. So my perspective, like a lot of people, and including Legend of the Total War, and I'm going to say I've always viewed Legend being full of shit on that subject. A lot of people, oh, but his campaign start position is difficult. No, it's fucking not. It really is not. The sheer possibilities in Confederation were always great. But now it's even more insane because of all the buffs that Kislev has gained. And it isn't a difficult campaign when you can eliminate Archaon very quickly, and the only challenge you end up having is Arbol. And there are ways to manipulate Arbol as well. Like basically take some territory, sell it to Malachi, start a war between him and Arbol, and let them fight each other while you're dealing with Archaon. You have an enormous level of possibilities. It's been made even better because there is a research, which I didn't get over. Well, actually I have, but I'm not sure why I'm taking cast waste attrition. Maybe some other reason, I'm not sure. Maybe a plague. Yeah, it is a plague, isn't it? Something. I don't know, really. Like, oh, it's because of cast corruption, not because of the cast waste attrition over there. So it's because of the corruption, because it doesn't give me immunity. Probably should have gotten some hag witches over there. But regardless, you have the ability of dominating the early game situation. And also, you got to consider, like, the kind of benefit you gain from defeating Daniel, or the Demon Prince, early. I'm not sure which lord has it, because I think I did get it over here. Oh yeah, so if you kill the Godslayer, you get minus 50% attrition, casualties from all attrition, and 20 diplomatic relations with all of Kislev. What this means, realistically, is that Boris has the ability of getting armies and lords that each of them, like, much easier than others. You can get all these things with others, sure, but others won't have the construction benefit, the campaign movement range, the diplomatic relations with Ice Court, the devotion and cast wasteland settlements. These are all very substantial benefits. But here's the kicker. All of these benefits are very strong, but there is one unique benefit that only Boris has. That's tied to his faction, not his skill line. And that is a commandment unique to him. And that is the order by order of the Tsar. This is insane. Let me just say it plainly. This is freaking insane. You do suffer a 31 income penalty with regards to this, but you gain 10 devotion, minus 12 corruption, 15% ward save against fighting Norska warriors of caste. This is ridiculously good. The reason is you use this when you're building up a province, right? You use this when you're building up a province, when you want to get a lot of devotion. The reason this is so powerful is you can get invocations through this specific benefit. And this benefit as well, like getting a high level of devotion, the two principal benefits of it is that, one, you nullify climate penalty. So Boris is the best, or one of the best campaigns in terms of dealing with climate, outside of campaigns like Axiatl and Castors that just have all climates available. But for a campaign where you don't have every climate available as suitable, he is the best to deal with it because he can nullify those penalties of climate if he gets to a high level of devotion, and he will get to that higher level of devotion better than anyone else. On top of that, because he's nullifying chaos corruption with this commandment, it means that it is much easier to get to a good situation in provinces that he takes control of. That is ridiculously good. And it's all corruption. It's not just even chaos corruption. It's all corruption. So Skaven corruption, vampire corruption, just being able to nullify that. You wouldn't want to use it completely in a province, but it does. But when you're just conquering a province, when you've just conquered it for a couple of turns, when the economy of that province would be pretty bad anyway, but because of various reasons, this is a enormous benefit. I think it should be standard for all Kislev factions. But it is one of the reasons why I do think Boris Ursus is the best campaign. Because yes, Ostankya has significant combat benefits, but Kislev's problem on the campaign side was never their army. It was developing provinces, developing regions, making it worthwhile to conquer a lot of territory. And I think from that point of view, Boris is quite better than Ostankya. The downside is that he can't confederate Ostankya in the same way that Ostankya can confederate him. So there's pros and cons with those two. For my personal perspective, I would prefer playing Boris Ursus, but let me know what you guys think. Because I don't think it's cut in, I don't think it's written in stone which one is better. I think that both Ostankya and Boris Ursus have their own significant advantages. I would probably say from a long campaign perspective, because of various reasons, Ostankya is probably better, but in the short term, I think Boris Ursus is far ahead of Ostankya. She can become really good in her own way, but even in the long... and the reason why she's better in the long term is, like, eventually in the long term in a Kislev campaign, you will just get these atamans, right? And you can get the Groundbreaker benefit, remove the penalties, and then reset their skills to get, Ambassador and all that kind of stuff. So keep that aspect in mind. Like, Ostankya will catch up in the long term, but early on in a campaign, I think Boris Ursus is just so far ahead. And having a significant early on advantage is going to allow you to, is going to have a cascading effect on the rest of your campaign, because you'll start doing ridiculous fucking shit like what I've done over here. Like, over here in this campaign, I have a 49 Patriarch capacity, only 8 tag witches, I admit. Like, I wouldn't necessarily take this campaign seriously in the sense, like, it wasn't the most optimal. But I have 105 freaking settlements. That is in 34 provinces by turn 68. To understand this is one of the most ridiculous bullshit campaigns I've played in this game, period. And I'm not exaggerating. The only one that can compare and even surpass this is Grombrindle with the dwarf rework. But the only reason Grombrindle is able to do that is through the guaranteed confederation of the dwarven factions. So if you're playing a Grombrindle campaign, you gain a lot of territory here, but then you confederate Thorgrim, and he might have a good amount of territory that you can take, right? Or you confederate Belagar, whoever has the most territory, you can span into different ways in a very substantial way. Without that confederation, Grombrindle will not manage what he does. Boris just does it. without that kind of benefit. You do have some difficult early game battles, because Archon is certainly not a cakewalk early on in a campaign, but you can manage it and then just dominate the map. If you're wondering why Norska is, and this is not even the peak capability of a campaign, because I may have spent a bit too much time conquering the Empire instead of pulverizing Norska, which probably would have been better. I would have gotten more supporters in that respect. But both Ostankya and Boris do have a supporter benefit, because they gain supporters through battles against Chaos, both Orthodoxy and Ice Court, so they're better than that. They don't have the diplomatic penalties, and they have diplomatic benefits with all Kislev factions. So enormous benefits. But regardless of which one you pick and which one you consider the best, I think it's clear without a shadow of a doubt that Ostankya and Boris Ursus are far freaking ahead of Kostaltyn and Katarin in every single way. Kostaltyn, signing out. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and enable notifications. Stay tuned for more.